that have a lot of passion and experience in this area. Sue is someone I've known for many years, and I've been a big fan of her work and her drive in areas around innovation and everything to do with innovation. So right now, Sue works with Path. The organization is called Path. You can check out that organization at your own time. But she has an experience of over 5 years in designing and developing products in health, especially in health. She's an expert in human-centered design approaches, user research, and analyzing and interpreting qualitative data to meet users' needs. So this is something that she does almost every other day. Sue currently serves as a design and innovation lead, as I said, with Path. They have a lab that it's called Living Lab here in Nairobi that she works in, where she oversees the maternal and child health portfolio and leads in product development and management. Before she joined Path a few years ago, she was a project engineer with the Science and Technology Hub at the University of Nairobi, where we have Makerspace as a fabrication lab. And at that lab, she led and developed a suite of innovations and facilitated hackathons that were more human-centered, designed from a human-centered approach. And therefore, a lot of work that she did there was also around health. And I think that's where her passion for health solutions came from. She thrives in building user-centered interventions and innovations, and is very passionate about communities through her work with initiatives and Ladies in Helmets, an organization that she founded and set up. She has a degree in civil engineering, so that's very interesting to note, because she's doing a lot of work in health, but her academic background is in civil engineering from Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology. So I think that's a long and brief, in a long and in a short way, a brief for Sue, and I'd like to stop there and hand it back to Dr. Lee.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Thank you, Sue. What a privilege to have you. You're so such an amazing profile. So I have here with me Takudzwa Chinzou, who is the chairman of the Zimbabwe Housing Company. Takudzwa is here in Perth, actually on a holiday, but I managed to convince him to come tonight to join us. And yes, I twisted his arm. So Takudzwa is an old colleague and friend of mine, and he was a graduate of the University of Western Australia, where I studied and where I currently work. And he specializes in town planning. So in Harare, he is the chairman of the Zimbabwe Housing Company, and he is his degree was in town planning from UWA, from Curtin and UWA. That's right. Sorry, Taku, what were you saying?
So I have a bachelor's degree in urban and regional planning, and I'm currently studying for a master's in project management back in Zimbabwe. I've been working there for over 10 years, right?
Yeah, over 10 years.
10 years, and
yes.
we do actually work with human-centered designs in some of the planning we do, and I'll give you a brief of what we do, how we implement it in Zimbabwe, so that you have an understanding of different planning perspectives when it comes to designing things that actually work with human beings.
Fantastic. Thank you, Takudzwa. So Takudzwa also comes from a line of a family of town planners. So his father was a town planner in Harare as well. So he comes with a lot of experience, a wealth of experience and knowledge, having been born into this industry.
Yes, true.
Yes. So we're very privileged to have him here with us as well. So, all right. So, to our presenters and to our students and to our colleagues all across Kenya, I just want to give you a quick overview of human-centered design as we have talked about it, so that we're all up to speed and on the same page. So we've talked about human-centered design as the center or the heart of identifying your business needs for your clients. So putting your clients right in the center of the design focus, and then understanding their needs through the practice of empathy, through really understanding what they require and what the experiences are in order to tailor a design to suit their needs. It also requires creativity. So there's creativity there. So creativity in order to come up with solutions and to integrate all the different parts of the picture to address those business needs. So it involves direct engagement with the people, so the end users who use the product, and you design with real context, so with a good awareness of who is using the product and how they're going to use it. All right. Sorry, I'm just getting my slides back. Okay. Yes, and the last part of it is prototyping. So Sue, I hope you can tell us a bit more about prototyping in your experience of human-centered design. Yeah, so what we might do then is go through, I'll ask you some questions, Sue, and yeah, particularly in terms of this approach. So human-centered design is based on these 4 principles. First, you identify the needs of the users, as we discussed, observing, learning from them. Then you go through a phase of ideation where you generate ideas, brainstorm ways of meeting those needs. Then you prototype, you come up with a mock-up of how you're going to do it, you test it, you get feedback and review the design. Is that correct, Sue, from your experience?
Yes, thank you, Lynn, and hi, everyone. So I think human-centered design basically goes through the same process and the design principles that you laid out there. But I want to talk more about the approach that my team uses when it comes to approaching the human-centered design, especially in designing solutions for health. So for Living Labs, we have an approach that we call the 4D, and it's basically the same steps, but the first D is discover. So how we usually conduct projects is that since Path is an NGO, we get most of our projects according to themes and issues that are currently being experienced in the global health world. So we already have an idea that this is a problem that exists. And what we usually do for the first step, that's your research step, ours we call it discover, is we try and find out more about this particular problem. That will involve doing intensive user research. It can be either through in-depth interviews, a combination of a series of methods. In-depth interviews, we do observations, we do visits where we go to the community, if you're working with the community, or facilities, and the different kinds of facilities that exist. And then when we go to after we do that, we have a stage that is quite important, especially when you're designing for health, which is defining exactly what the problem is. And for human-centered design, you'll find that most of the problems that you think are problems, when you go to the communities, they are not problems to them. So you have to clearly define exactly what the problem is here, and then validate what you have sort of extrapolated from doing the discovery processes with the users. Remember, the core principle of HCD is designing with the users as opposed for the users. So we have to involve them every single step that we do. The next step for us is dream. We call our next step dream. And this is the ideation stage where we participate in a lot of I think there's a background noise. Someone might need to mute. Yeah, so we do and use tools like Crazy Eights, where we just open our minds to trying to find ways of solving the problem that we have just defined. And we do this with the users as well. So we'll go back to the facilities, if you're working with the facilities, the communities, and involve them in these exercises. And something that we've realized is that the communities are really amazing at coming up with ideas to the problems that they are facing. And for us as designers is to make sure that these ideas are amplified and, giving them sort of the power to solve some of the problems that they're facing. And then the next stage for us is now design. Design is where now we combine prototyping and testing. So we prototype in different ways. We have low fidelity prototypes, and when you come to the Living Labs office, and if any one of you wants to come and visit, you're very open. You'll find different low fidelity prototypes that are helping us explain and also represent the ideas that have come out of the ideation session in a way that is easy to interact with and test without investing so much initial capital into the ideas. And then after that, then if it's validated and the users find it desirable, and you also look at the feasibility of the solution, then that's when we proceed to high fidelity prototypes and so on. And then later on, we conduct tests. Depending on the product that you have, either a digital product or a physical product, we can do usability testings where we invite people to the laboratory. We give them the prototype and observe how they're interacting with it, have focus group discussions, and just get a perspective of what they think, and then iterate on that. So our whole process is very iterative, because you might get to the third D and find out that you need to go back and ask more questions around the problem. So that's how we are approaching the human-centered design in health. Thank you.
Fantastic. So you do meet all of these steps, but as you say, you do it through the 4D process. Can you tell us again, a recap what the 4Ds are? What's it? Discovery?
Yeah, so the first is discover. The second is define, where you define the problem. Third is dream, the dream stage. And then fourth is the develop or design. Fourth is design, yeah.
Beautiful. 4D. Was this a framework that you came up with with your colleagues, or was it something that you used or you found elsewhere?
So there are a lot of frameworks that are currently existing. Even when you look at online, there are so many frameworks that exist. But for the kind of work that Path does, it's something we adopted based on the kind of projects that we have, because we have different kinds of projects. I'll speak for one, our main anchor project that led to the whole, just us outlining the approach. For this project, we were required to find ways of increasing the motivation of healthcare workers, and we had to ideate solutions for them. So the dream stage for us became something very vital, and define and dream became very vital for us that we needed to include in our processes, because we needed to find ways of how do we increase someone's motivation? Yes, there are things that you can do like giving them money, but that's not sustainable. So how do you tap into the intrinsic motivation of the frontline healthcare workers in a way that is sustainable and something that can be escalated? So based on the projects, that's how we ended up tailoring the process for us.
Right. So in that sense, the dream framework, or the use of the word dream, even allowed people to really tap into their ideals and what they, however lofty it might be or unattainable, they still had the opportunity to articulate or say what those things might be for them. Like their deepest feelings about it would be able to come to the surface. Is that correct?
Exactly. And you see, you're giving the users that power and the tools to also be involved in the solution making. So the whole human-centered design approach is moving away from coming up with solutions somewhere, prescribing solutions for people, and we are moving now to designing these solutions with them. Let's sit together, find ways. What do you think about this particular problem? And then compile all these ideas together. And there's a lot of power in collaboration and just sitting together and coming up with solutions. So that's what we are giving. Yeah.
That's really fantastic. Our students at IOME 005 are now working on a project where they are acting as human-centered designers to design a toy for to help children with conflict resolution skills. So for them, their clients are now the children, but also the parents involved or the caregivers. So they're in the process of getting information from these various end users in order to create an opportunity for themselves to come up with a terrific design that meets the child's needs. So yeah, it's very similar to this process that we've introduced is very aligned with discover, define, dream, and design. But I think yours sounds even better. So I'd recommend to all our students to look at these 4Ds instead. I'll put it in the chat so you can start, thinking about them. So thank you so much, Sue. I'll now just defer to Takudzwa. Did you have any thoughts to share on that at all from any of the questions or?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So I've discovered something while Sue was talking that like everywhere we go, no matter it's planning, it's health industry, it's civil engineering, it's philosophy, we all have to come. We are all now doing things that are human-centered because at the end of the day, we are the humans. We have to face the challenges. We have to dig in what's affecting people and have to come up with like results. It's not only doctors now, as I can see. So when it comes to planning, I'll just go in a little bit.
Sure.
When it comes to planning in Zimbabwe, we also use the 4 human-centered design principles. Firstly, we definitely have to do research, who we are working with, the land we get, what do people want. We go down and do participatory planning, sit down with the community, ask them what they want. There is a difficult though, because everyone has a different opinion. Different age groups have different things they want, like parents want parks, teenagers want schools, though people around their late 30s want entertainment, something like nightclubs, but you can't please everyone, but you have to come up with ideas. So we usually sit down and do participatory planning in the beginning, where we try to find a community where we can help. We sit down with them, we talk down, we do some brainstormings of what the end users want. We sit down, and then after that, we do the ideation processes, where we now is our own consultants, the Zimbabwe Housing Company. We see and brainstorm and read the ideas that the community would have given us. And now we start phasing them out, not phasing as such, but classifying them like according to importances, because the schools are more important than nightclubs. Parks are more important than
so like prioritizing the
what
needs, which communities' needs should have a bigger voice. Would you say bigger voice or more relevant to that?
No, I'd say more
community?
relevant.
Yeah,
it would be more relevant. So we sit down as a consultant, and during the brainstorming, because we are private consultants, we always go back to the government, the local authority who will be dealing them, and we present to them their proposals. Sometimes they agree, sometimes they refuse, but when they agree, they will either tell us more on what to do or reduce on what we would have planned. And then after that, we go to the prototypes, where we now sit down and come up with the models. Usually in planning, ours mostly is by computers because there's now technologies where we use drones to go and see the areas inside. and it will give us videos where we'll be able to now say, okay, we want to create roads, we should go this way, this way, this way. We want to create the parks, which they wanted. The community said they wanted the school closer to the shops. They wanted the service station closer to the main road. And then we start implementing it. And then after we implement the designs and come up with designs, usually we use AutoCAD, GPS scanning, surveying, and stuff. After we had done that, we then go back to the community, do 3D models where we show them PowerPoints, show them this is what we're going to come up with. And then after that is done, we submit to the local authorities of Zimbabwe to give us permission. And once permission is granted, that's when all the development starts. So usually that's how we do our planning in Zimbabwe. And at the end of the day, all we care about is our human beings.
Wow, that is fantastic, Takudzwa. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's amazing. So your users are involved, or you thinking about the users at every stage of the process of planning. And I really like what you shared about the use of the technologies and the testing. So you use like drones to scan and survey, and you get more information. You come back, you analyze it, you rework the design in order to incorporate the new data that you've received, new information.
Yes.
So it's always a process. It sounds like it's regularly a process of prototyping, testing, revising and revising in order to, based on the new information that's
that will be coming. Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Sue, do you also find that that is true in your case? Like the information is constantly flowing and that you shouldn't, is there a point where you think the information should now stop and the design should just stay as it is? Or do you then come up with version 2.1, 2.2 update? What is your process on that?
Yeah, there's a high likelihood of that, and especially as designers, you want something to be kind of perfect. You want to get it right, but what we usually say is do not fall in love with your idea. So that sort of opens you up to being willing to go back to the whole process again. So after you've gotten to the design stage, you still have to go and test it. By testing it, you're sort of getting more information about your product. So when you're so attached to your idea, you'll not want to present it to someone else or even hear criticism about it. So I think with HCD, you still have to go iteratively, but you also you need to remember that you have to come to a stop where, yes, this is the final product. And there are a couple of tools that can help you do that, where you assess either, for us in the NGO world, we usually assess on impact. So is the impact and effort? What kind of impact will this solution have? And what's the effort required to implement it? So based on that, we are able to just filter out some of the solutions and end up with either 2 or 3 that can be implemented easily, and something that can be done and done well. So that helps getting something like a matrix that just helps you put a stop to it, because it can be very iterative and it can be nonstop.
Can be nonstop, yeah. What do you think so if do you still think that the design is something that is that's something you test or get feedback on as you, even after the first stage of it being implemented? Is there a point where you come back to it and say, okay, now that we've trialed it, people have been using it for some time, is there a point where you get feedback on that and then improve?
Yes, so it's something that also Living Labs is heading to, which is adaptive implementation, where you think implementation is going to go a certain way, but when you finally take the solution to the ground, or in our case to facilities, it doesn't end up panning the way you thought. So we still have to adapt it to the conditions that we find in the field. Yeah.
Love it. Adaptive implementation.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Taku, do you have any experience with that? Like after you've implemented something, it just didn't turn out the way you wanted it or you thought it would, and
Because a lot of projects do that. Because usually, like the first rejection will be the people, like, oh no, we don't want this, and you'd have put a lot of time and research. Is like what Sue was saying. I think XCD, you have to be open-minded, and when you do it, you have to have the concept that there is no wrong answer. Because as soon as you think you are the correct one, that's where everything goes wrong. Because you start looking at other people's concept or ideas as lower than yours, and you don't want to do that. You have to be open minded, and it's really hard though for someone to tell you after like 2-3 months of hard working to tell you that, oh, I'm not interested in this because of this, and you have to just man it up and see how you can correct it. But we've had a couple of projects where we would like do designs, concepts, submit it, the local authority approves it, and people reject it, and then people wouldn't want to come and live in those communities. So at the end of the day, we used to be like that in the beginning, but then we started doing like, as when we start projects now, we do them in phases. So we'd have 4 phases. We do the consultation, we do HCD, and then when the government approves it, we do phase 1, like a small portion, and see how people react, how many people would get. If the parks are done, how many people would start like using them to see if we are going somewhere.
Yeah.
So usually when we see like, we usually gauge at 70% response. If about 70% of the community would start using them, start moving into the house that's designed, we would then have phase 2, phase 3 until 5. And then after it's complete, we go and look for a new area to start and help people as well. But yeah, HCD has a lot of challenges.
Yeah. So that's amazing. So then you wait until you hit a certain number of approvals before you continue to the next phase.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really good a good point to note, that in your design process and when you're going through this process of ideation, prototyping, testing, that you do need some benchmarks to tell you when it's okay to proceed to the next stage of development. Yes. Right? So for you, it was at 70%.
Yes, usually when our project's at 70%, we can give it a go ahead to the next phase.
Yeah, what about you, Sue? Do you have such benchmarks to help you determine how your users are responding before you move on to the next phase of development?
Yeah, so we usually work a lot with monitoring and evaluation specialists. So depending on the project, we have a couple of indicators that we consider. So those indicators help us know and see whether the solution that we're creating is something that we can move on to the next stage. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to ask you both a difficult question because, you know, you're people who have had to adapt to changing situations, trialing things, maybe failing even a few times to get the results that you want. So what kind of attitude do you think you need to have, or what kind of qualities do you hold on to during these moments when you put your heart out there, all your feelings, invest so much money, time, your own creativity, your own, all your original feelings, and then it's just thrown back in your face? What do you do in those times? Or what are the qualities that you think keep you going? Taku or Sue, who would like to go first? Taku.
So when it comes to I'll give an example. It's something like you do something and then you get rejected, like a college application, and you get rejected. All you have to do is have a big heart and be all like, what can I describe it? What's the right word? I'm trying to find the right word. Like, you have to be a patient person.
Okay.
Be big-hearted and patient and be considering. Because at the end of the day, yes, we would have used our passion, resources, the finance and stuff. But at the end of the day, it's more of the idea of helping people understand what's being. Yeah.
So it's like it's not about you.
Yeah.
Right? That's what you're saying. That's what you mean by a big heart.
Yes. You have to have an open heart where criticism, what can I call it? It will be constructive criticism. For myself, I look at it as constructive criticism.
So no matter how people say it, so they might say, "Oh, Takudzwa, you've wasted your time. This is such nonsense. How can you waste my time?" Like, what you will then do is frame it positively for yourself.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, but with a little bit of, oh, really? But at the end of the day, you want to help the community. So you'd be like, you would listen to what they say and you would like try to make them correct you in a nicer way. Yeah, it's like, oh, I'm a human being too. I make mistakes. You can lead me through this, and then use the reverse psychology where now I am the human being where the CHD has to come and be implemented in our company, Zimbabwe Housing. So now it will be like, okay, you don't want our ideas. No, we're okay with it. Now you come and help us. You do the concept, you do the planning. We'll give you the frameworks. And usually it works. It works because mostly with houses, people have their own dream houses, ideas and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you really, really establish a mindset where you are the vehicle of the design and letting them design through you.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, that's what we usually do. And like most communities love it when you include them, even something small as naming a street after their chief, that would really appreciate it. Yes.
That is being very inclusive as well. So really including, what is an example of that, Takuta? Is there an example of it?
It's not political, but we actually have a street named Emerson Mnangagwa now, our recent president.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's something where you do it in small communities where we go like, for example, in Chipinge, and we meet the chief, is called Srinarashe. Usually we would even name a park after him or a street after his favorite daughter or son. And when you get like the elders love and respect, nothing would go wrong.
Wow.
They'll feel like they're part of everything. Imagine them telling everyone who comes and visit, this street is named after my daughter. Something small like that, it would help them. Yeah.
Right, and that cascades throughout the rest of the community from the top, when the people the elders who are respected then have such ownership and pride in that development that it can then flow to everyone else. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Sue, thank you, Takudzwa. Sue, do you have some experience with that as well, or that kind of inclusivity, or how you make people feel really like they are part of that design?
Yeah. I think I'll start by answering the question about what do you do when your design has been rejected. Unlike Takuza, some of us don't have a big heart, so sometimes it can get to you.
Yes, that's very honest and very real.
Yeah. You get really discouraged at times when something you thought was really brilliant, the users reject it. So for us, one thing that really helps, because I've encountered such a problem before, and one thing that really helped is being in a team that is willing to just iterate as we continue, even as we're getting this feedback from. So that team spirit where, yes, it has been rejected. You talk about it, you feel bad about it, but and maybe just go for ice cream and talk about what happened. And then
debrief, let it all out.
Debrief. And then the next day you start all over again. So having a team that is willing to just be able to iterate based on that feedback really helps. Something else is curiosity, because when they reject that feedback, there's something that they see that you haven't really understood with them. So that's where empathy comes in. That's where empathy comes in, because you are curious. Okay, what what makes you feel that way about this solution? And so it goes back again now to the whole cycle of trying to understand them and understand how they feel about your solution and so on. Yeah, what was the second question? Sorry, I missed that.
The second question, oh no, I've just forgotten.
Okay.
Do you remember what I
Yeah,
said?
Yeah, I think.
I think
You can go, Sue.
yeah, I think it was about inclusivity.
Oh yes, that's right. How do you
Yes.
make your clients or your end users feel like they had a stamp on that project?
Yeah, so for health, we have so many stakeholders that are involved in health, because for us, we have to work with all the way from the leadership. That's the Ministry of Health officials come to, since Kenya is devolved, we have to go to the county MOH and then the facilities and so on. So there are very many stakeholders and they have different wants. As Takuzi was saying, everyone is coming with their own wants, their own vision of solving the problem and so on. And for us, what we do is create an environment where all these different levels of people can sit together and talk freely about these issues, because we noticed that there's usually a communication problem between the people at the front line, the healthcare workers at the front line, and the people sitting in the big offices and at the Ministry of Health. So creating that environment where we bring them together and facilitate a conducive sort of engagement where make sure the Ministry of Health understands the problems that the frontline are going through, and the frontline healthcare workers also understand the problems and the challenges that the Ministry of Health is. So creating that sort of including everyone in the ecosystem, really, I feel like it's really important if you want some of these innovations to be impactful.
So that's a really good, really important point. Thank you, Sue. I guess that comes down to relationship building. So even in that communication process and extending empathy, if there isn't that supportive relationship, or you don't build that rapport, it's going to be very difficult to communicate. Is that right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
what do you do to build those relationships? Because you don't know these people. They're new to you, you're new to them. Where do you start with building that rapport in order to extend empathy after that?
The first step for us is usually making sure that we also make them understand what human-centered design is and what the approach involves. So before we do anything, we usually convene all the stakeholders together and kind of have a training on what human-centered design is. And the good thing about human-centered design, there are a lot of tools and icebreakers and facilitation techniques to just help someone understand. Yes, understand exactly what HCD is and the importance of it, because everyone is interested of having sustainable solutions, creating better solutions, and so on. So having that first step as something to just bring them together, and even through the icebreakers and the fun activities that you're doing with them, then there's already like a relationship. You've already broken that ice, and they're willing to speak more freely to you. They're willing to even talk to you about some of the things that they would normally not talk to anyone about. So I feel like that's a very important step that just helps start the relationship.
Okay, so thank you so much, Sue. That's fantastic. So icebreakers in a workshop setting, for example, where you have all the stakeholders in the room, you do some warm-up activities, some fun things, let them start to feel comfortable opening up with each other.
Yes.
But what if you don't have a workshop? What if you're one-on-one with just a few people and you're not in a working in an organization? How do you start building those relationships? Because our students are going to have to do that. So what would your advice be to them based on your experience?
Don't start with the hard questions. Don't start with the hard questions.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Don't dive in directly into finding out what you want to find out. Yeah, so start finding out about this person, and it also helps in trying to build out the journey of this person, because this is human-centered design. You have to understand the person first. So you can start by asking about their day, what they normally do. Just ease into normal conversation first before now you start asking the difficult questions.
Yeah,
Yes,
because
that's true.
sorry, go on, Taku.
No, I was saying that's true. Because as soon as you dip into the hard questions, people just walk away. Because they're like, this is too much. But as soon you start with simple questions, understanding what the person likes, to like asking about football, soccer, anything.
The World Cup that's
Yes,
going on.
something that would engage them to be like more openly, because for someone to be more open, you have to know them. Most people, like, they just don't go from, so we are coming from Western Australia, we do human-centered. They wouldn't go for it. They'll be like, sorry, sir, I don't have time. Sorry, ma'am, I don't have time. But like Sue said, you first ask personal questions which are appropriate. Hear what they do for fun. If you have a little bit of idea of what they do for fun, just chip in, put ideas, and then you start interacting and going into the hard questions bit by bit.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice. Yeah, and a big lesson, because as a researcher or someone who really wants to get things going, you might just say hello, hi, introduce yourself, and then just dive straight into it.
Question, yeah.
But then you will lose the person, right? That's what you're saying. You're gonna lose your person.
Yes, that's true. And when it comes to participatory planning and like human-centered designs or concept where you engage people, most people are so ignorant. So you have to know how to approach your people and your stakeholders.
That's right. So becoming very familiar with the territory you're going into, even preempting maybe some of, or go observe beforehand. What is this neighborhood? What do the children do here? What is the environment like for them? What might their experiences be like? Have some idea beforehand, so that will give you some, even if you start a conversation and you're wrong, it's okay, because the person can see that, this person's actually trying, and this person has some idea of what my life is like or what my experiences are like. Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
Okay. So I think, well, we have 10 minutes. I was wondering if any of our students or any of our audience members have a question for Sue or Takudzwa on their experiences. If you have a question, please unmute yourself, or you can write it in the chat if you feel comfortable. And yeah, feel free to ask any question that you have. Yes, Abdullah? Nasur? Sorry, Nasur, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Hi, Sue. Hi, Takudzwa. My question is, what merits do you use to define the problem at hand? Because like Sue, you said your persona or your main concern is about matrimonial. So you are mainly focusing on women. But sometimes challenges come which are general. Like for example, you are solving a problem on climate action. Let's take an example. You are having parents that are throwing diapers along the ocean. You are having school kids who are just throwing their bottles away along the ocean. So how do you define the problem or the persona in terms of that kind of situation? And what determinants are you going to use to come up with the ideas that is suited to that problem? Because it seems to be like a diversified problem that is affecting the whole community. So how do you narrow down to solve such kind of a menace?
Okay.
So usually when it comes to some, like to your example, you give the diapers being dumped and like people dumping airs. Usually after we notice it or assess it, we try again to engage the community, sit down with them and try to educate them on the implications it will have on the global what kind of
Mentioned
climate change is.
the pollution that they
So
do.
we would educate them on like how bad pollution is, because mostly you notice, like there's a good example, the diapers one. The kids would know that it's pollution, but some of the elders wouldn't know. They would be like, we grew up doing this, and that would be the hard thing. So to educate them and to go around like sending out flyers which says no dumping, like, and giving them the consequences of what would happen next, because usually with like elder people, it's really hard to like to implement new things, because they'll be saying, oh yeah, younger than us, you can tell us what to do, but at the end of the day, it's more of our climate change and we have to educate them. So we start using ideas such as doing community presentations on weekends, for example, calling them for coffee or drinks during the weekend. They sit down whilst they're drinking, we tell them what we think about the dumping, like what we think about the what they will be doing towards the like the climate changes, and try to implement, to teach them in a nicer way so that they understand where we are coming from and where we are going, and like really go deep into telling them the disadvantages of what the climate change is doing to the not only the community but to the whole world.
Right. Thank you, Takudzwa. That's so important. It's topic of education. Thank you, Nasser, for that question as well. So what you're saying, Takudzwa, is that you can't actually define a problem. You have to let your community be part of defining even that problem for what it could mean for them.
Yes.
So, and you do that through education. So your first step, if you have that situation happening, is to get buy-in into that perspective on what that action is actually doing, the consequences. And it's very good what you said about being targeted towards the influential members of that community first, in order to again get that initial buy-in, define that problem, and then work outwards from there. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true.
Sue, is that similar for your experience?
My experience is a bit different, but
Yeah.
other than what Takuza has said, which is, I think it's also very important to consider. I feel like the first step, if you're already, like for example, Abdallah, if you're designing for climate action, you need to first of all map out all the stakeholders that are involved in that, and then prioritize there are different kinds of stakeholders. So there's the influencers who are influencing that behavior that you're seeing and you want to stop. Let's say if it's a behavioral problem that you want to solve. So there's the influencers, there's the users of your solution, there's the customers who's going to buy your solution, and so on. So if you do a proper stakeholder mapping, then it will be really easy to know who and define the problem for the user. So you'll end up finding that yes, there are so many stakeholders doing a lot of activities, but your user is doing a particular activity that you want to change. So being very clear about where your stakeholders lie and the different levels of your stakeholders will really help you define who's the user and what problem they're facing. And by defining the problem, there's a tool we use, which is called the point of view statements that help you describe the persona, describe the context, and kind of describe the problem. So that also helps.
Fantastic. So we did have one of those examples we worked with on Monday, where you have the persona, the context, the perspective, how the person sees it from their point of view. Is that correct? Yeah, that's fantastic, yeah. Sue. That's a really excellent, systematic problem-solving approach. Yeah, where you really work through it step by step, identify all the stakeholders, and help ensure that you don't miss anyone as well. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And also know who you're designing for, because sometimes you think you're designing for a certain user and then you realize they are the customer or they're an influencer and you're not really the user of your solution. So it's very important to know that.
So just in the case of Nasser's example of the diapers in the ocean, of water pollution and rubbish in the oceans, who would be, how would you, just from your experience, who would be the users in that regard? Who are the end users of that problem?
I think it depends with the solution that you want.
Yeah.
So let's say you're designing for behavioral change. Then the users would be the mothers who are dumping the diapers in the ocean. Yeah, so it really depends on the solution and what you
Right.
want to achieve. Yeah, so it keeps on changing. So because you'll find others will opt to go to the waste pickers. Why are they not picking the diapers, or why are they not cleaning the ocean? And that can be a solution on itself. So it really, yeah, it really
So
depends on
many
what you
steps.
want to achieve. Yeah.
So interesting. So there's actually so many solutions within that one issue, right? And so many problems that can be defined within that one issue with different users, end users to target.
Yes, that's true.
Fantastic.
Exactly.
Thank you. Nasra, I hope that answered your question. Thank you so much, Sue and Takudzwa. We
I
have
think
one
there's
more
another
question. Yeah, from Declan Magero. To any of the speakers, at what point do you consider feedback as sufficient? What's the saturation point? So we sort of covered that previously, but what do either of you, anything to add to that?
I can't put a number to it. I think so for
What's the
starters,
saturation point?
yeah, saturation point is where you start finding the same answers to the questions and you're not finding anything new. So based on the region, because you'll find there are different contexts. So let's say you've gone to a rural environment, I'd say the number to work with is maybe 12 to 15 as the number to start with, and then by the 10th user you'll feel like you're getting the similar answers. So that means that you've reached the saturation point. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yes, I agree with Sue, because when it comes to engaging participants, sometimes after I think about 10, 15 people, you start getting the same answers.
Yeah.
So that's when you give yourself like a guideline. Now it's just reputation after reputation.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, Declan. I hope that answers your question. We have 1 more minute. If anyone has a quick question for our speakers, you can share that. Otherwise, any closing comments from Sue and Takudzwa to our students and our colleagues on, what would your advice to them be in terms of, just if there's 1 or 2 things you could say to them as human-centered designers, what would it be?
I think maybe I could start. I think this space is really amazing because you're designing solutions with the people the solutions are supposed to serve. So for me is do not lose the voice of the users. Make sure you have it as you're designing your solutions, because we are all shifting from designing solutions that we think would work for people to designing these solutions with them for better outcomes, better solutions, and also sustainability. So make sure that you keep on having that voice of the user as you're doing your design. And welcome to the journey. You can reach out in case you have any questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Sue. That's beautiful advice. Always having the user's voice with you as you're designing. Thank you, Taku.
Yes, I would just say a little bit on top of what Sue said. Like, you have to have the voice of the people when you're designing and doing your thing, and please have a open-minded and always think outside the box. If thinking outside the box is too hard, just make your box really small so that everything you think is hard, and be open to other ideas, what people bring. Because usually some ideas might come from people you'd really look down on, but they would have the ideas which would help. So that's what I can say.
We have really been so lucky today to have both these amazing individuals with us. Sue, you've brought to us the really systematic, methodological approach to human-centered design. And Taku, you've brought the big open heart and attitude that we all need to have in order to be resilient and to stay open-minded to the process and the hardships that they bring. So both of you have been really instrumental in bringing the science of human-centered design and the art of how we need to be as humans in order to approach this issue. Yeah, so thank you. Big round of applause to our guests today. Thank you so much for been really enlightening, and we've learned so much. So I'm trying to clap my hands. Yes. Thank you. Lower hand, clap hands. Love heart. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Yes, thank you, Sue. You've been brilliant. Thank you, everybody, for listening. You've been an amazing audience. Thank you for your questions. And yes, so we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. So thank you and have a good evening.
Cheers, guys.